He was expecting a widow. I walked in by accident. Now we're married, and his goat hates me. Welcome to Dry Wells. If I hadn't lost my hat in that windstorm, been blinded by dust, and sore from sunburn, I might not have hurried into the courthouse at all to escape the thick red muck. If I hadn't been in the courthouse, I definitely wouldn't have said yes when the clerk asked, "Cassidy Lane for the 2 o'clock?" "Sure am," I told him. "Weird way to confirm a cleaning position?" I muttered as the harassed-looking man hurried me through to a room of seated people. Next thing I knew, I was standing beside a man with a thick beard, dark hair, and an expression like he'd rather be fishing. He pushed a bunch of white flowers into my hands. A man standing in front of us muttered a few words. "Cassidy!" "Yes," I snapped, facing the bearded man. He grunted. "You may now kiss the bride," a voice boomed. "Wait." "What?" But it was too late. A dozen claps echoed through the dusty room. Someone tossed rice. "Jack Coltrane, ma'am," he said, bowing stiffly as he grabbed my arm and pulled me out the door. "Didn't you see the letter?" he asked. "Yes, but this is a funny type of cleaning job," I spluttered, looking around wildly for escape. "You're Cassidy Lane, ain't you?" I blinked. "Well, yes, but..." Jack crossed his arms. "I was expecting a different Cassidy." Well, I wasn't expecting a husband at all. There was a long, awful silence. Then Jack muttered, "Guess we're hitched." I straightened my skirt. "Guess we are." "Come on," he said, lifting me into the back of his wagon. And this, folks, honest as the day is long, is how my new life started. Married to clean. We rode in silence. Well, he rode. I clung to the back of his buckboard wagon like a misplaced sack of flour. In for a penny, in for a pound, I thought. Can't get much worse. Better than being on the street with nothing. Chickens scattered as we pulled in, and a goat stared at me like I was the punchline to a joke it had already heard. The ranch was dry, dusty, and falling apart, kind of like its owner. Jack helped me down and said, "You can sleep in the room. I'll sleep in the barn." This was clearly a mistake. "Clearly," I echoed, "but I don't snore, if that sweetens the deal." He didn't smile, not even a twitch. Well, I did what any newly married woman would do in my situation. I unpacked my single carpet bag, borrowed his best china to make tea, and sat on his porch like I owned the place. Because maybe, accidentally or not, I did. And I wasn't leaving until I figured out exactly what sort of man I'd married. Or, at the very least, until I got a decent bath. Turns out baths were rarer than hen's teeth around here. "No hot water unless you boil it," Jack said the next afternoon, pouring himself coffee like nothing was wrong in the world. "Don't need it heated," I replied sweetly. "Just a tub, a bar of soap, and the decency of you not peeking." He didn't even flinch. "Ain't got no tub either." I blinked. "What do you have?" "A spring out back." He was serious, stone-faced, storm-brewing serious. I took a sip of his bitter coffee and nearly spat it out again. So I did what any respectable woman would do. I grabbed my soap, the cleanest dress I had, a threadbare feed sack to dry down with, and marched off to find the spring. It was more of a glorified trickle tucked beneath a clump of willows bowed low over the water, their silvery leaves whispering like gossip. But it was clear, running, and cold enough to raise the dead. I scrubbed the dust from my skin, wrung out my dress, and laid it on a sun-warmed rock, and was halfway through chasing the bar of runaway soap when I heard the bleat. A goat came trotting down the hill like he had an appointment to ruin my life. He sniffed me, sneezed, then tried to eat my underthings off the bush. "Get, you goat-faced demon!" I hissed, swatting him with the wet cloth. That's when I heard Jack. Lucifer! He stepped into view, eyes locked on me in my soaking shift. Turn around, Jack, I snapped, unless you want to lose an eye. He flinched. Didn't mean to interrupt. Well, you have. So, unless you came to drown yourself, I suggest you retreat. Jack muttered something about wives being noisier than goats and disappeared back up the path. Lucifer, unbothered, farted and lay down on my clean dress. I finished up under the fading sky, teeth chattering and soap lost to the spring. When I finally trudged back to the house, damp and barefoot, I found Jack waiting on the porch with a lantern and an old tin of liniment. For the chill, he said, handing it to me. That almost sounded like concern. Don't flatter yourself, he muttered. Getting up, he went over to the barn, but he'd left the lantern burning, and when I got inside, there was a folded blanket on the spare bed. Still scratchy as sin, but put there by a stubborn, silent man who maybe wasn't as heartless as he claimed. I burrowed under it, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Probably the goat again. But maybe something more. The next morning, Jack left before sunrise to mend a fence. I took that as permission to poke around. I swept the porch, reorganized his pantry, and stitched the torn curtain in the front room. Lucifer the goat supervised the entire operation with a judgy look. No matter how many times I kicked him out, he managed to get back in. So, I just let it be. Mid-morning, I found a shovel. Not to dig anything. To whack the rug, I told myself. But Lucifer might be a target if he got too mean. That won't survive your elbow grease, came a voice behind me. Jack, dusty from head to boot. Neither will your pantry if you keep storing nails beside the sugar. He raised an eyebrow. You touched my pantry? I upgraded it. You're welcome. We spent a few awkward minutes drinking lemonade I'd brewed with dried lemon rinds. The silence between us was heavy, like something neither of us knew how to carry yet. Then, out of nowhere, he said, the Cassidy I was expecting was older, a widow from Red Creek. We'd been riding for a while. I reckon she got cold feet. I blinked. You just let the courthouse marry us, knowing I was the wrong Cassidy? He shrugged. Didn't know you were the wrong one till you opened your mouth. I smacked him with the dish towel. Lucifer bleated with approval. That evening, Jack surprised me again. He brought in a basket of eggs, handed them over without a word, then said, Tomorrow's market day. We go into town. You can buy whatever nonsense women need. You mean soap, thread, and underthings? He turned crimson. That kind of nonsense. I grinned. Generous of you. I'll be in the barn. He vanished like the conversation had physically wounded him. Lucifer stared after him. We're going to get along just fine, I told the goat. Then I cooked us both an omelet and named the skillet Mildred. Market day in Drywells was a dust cloud of wagons, gossip, and overpriced doilies. I wore my nicest, least stained dress and tried not to trip over the hem. Jack walked beside me like I was a cart he'd rather leave behind. You don't have to glare at everyone, I whispered. They're all looking, he grumbled. It's just 'cause I'm new and you're married now. Stand tall and don't let them get to you. He grunted, which I'd figured meant something between fair point and I'm reconsidering my life choices. At the general store, I picked out essentials, soap, buttons, and cinnamon, if we could afford it. Jack threw in extra flour and a hammer. For your mouth or the goat's? I teased. Whichever breaks first, he replied, deadpan. But when I lingered at a ribbon rack, he surprised me. He didn't scoff, he didn't roll his eyes, he just added the ribbon to the pile. Didn't say a word. I stared at the ribbon like it had sprouted wings. My heart did something foolish. I nearly fainted. Outside, a woman bustled over, all puffed skirts and lips pursed tighter than a pickle jar. "Jack Coltrane, you didn't say you were finally married." "Mrs. Crabtree." Jack tipped his hat. "Didn't think it was newsworthy," he muttered. Mrs. Crabtree squinted at me. "You poor dear. Blink twice if you need rescuing. I'll blink 4 times if I need whiskey." I smiled. Jack nearly choked. On what? I couldn't say. Dignity, maybe. By the time we got home, the sun was setting and I had blisters on both feet. Jack helped unload the supplies, then handed me the ribbon without looking. "For your hair. Look like something you'd like." I stared at him. "Jack Coltrane, if you keep this up, I might accidentally fall in like with you." He looked horrified. "Don't worry," I added. I said like, "Not love." He looked slightly less horrified. Lucifer the goat watched from the porch, clearly disappointed by the lack of fireworks. But I felt something stir under my ribs anyway. Something dangerous, something sweet. The next morning began with a chicken standoff. Not between me and Jack, between me and the chickens. Jack had gone into town early, muttering something about axle grease and solitude. I took that as a green light to conquer the hen house, except the hens weren't on board. I approached with my basket, whistling like a fool. The red one squawked, the speckled one flapped, and the mean white one, Lucifer in feathered form, launched herself straight at my face. I dropped the basket and screamed like a banshee. Jack returned an hour later to find me on the porch, arms scratched, dignity dented, and one egg triumphantly cradled in my palm. "Hen tussle?" he asked. "Hen mutiny," I said, holding out an egg. But I got my ransom. He blinked. Then he laughed. A proper laugh, deep and warm, which seemed to surprise even him. That evening, we ate stew on the porch steps. "So," I said between bites, "what exactly are your plans for me?" He stiffened. "Ain't got any. Didn't ask for you. And yet, here I am." He nodded slowly. "You fix things. You talk too much. You make my goat sort of behave. So, I'm a miracle. Or a disaster. Jury's out." I took a large spoonful of stew. "Have you ever considered letting me stay?" He didn't answer. Didn't have to. His silence was starting to speak volumes. The wind shifted. The chickens squawked. Lucifer bleated. And I knew I was getting under his skin, which was good, because he was definitely under mine. More than I dared admit. Early next morning, I'd taken it upon myself to fix the window that whistled every time the wind blew. Jack watched me struggle with a crooked pane of glass and said, "You're gonna slice your fingers off." "And if I do, I expect a burial with music and pie," I replied, cursing when the knife slipped. Jack sighed, muttered something about stubborn women, and disappeared. A short while later, he returned with gloves, a screwdriver, and 2 mugs of strong coffee. He handed one over. "Drink this before you ruin both our lives." By mid-morning, we were both elbow-deep in dust and minor arguments. "That's not how you fold a sheet," I told him. He raised an eyebrow. "You fold 'em? You don't just heap them like you were raised by coyotes. Fold the corners, too," I showed him. Jack grunted and tried again. The result was marginally better, still lumpy, but less offensive. We folded in silence for a minute. Then he asked, "Why'd you really come out west?" I hesitated. The truth hung on my tongue like a too heavy secret. "Wanted to start over. I said softly. Got tired of being the girl everyone pitied or whispered about. Out here, nobody knows me. He nodded once. I get that. Why'd you write to Cassidy the widow? Jack looked away. Figured it was time. Pa's just gone. Ma passed last winter. Goat keeps escaping. I needed help. And instead, you got me. He looked at me fully then. Yeah, I did. That night, a thunderstorm rolled in. The roof creaked like an older man's bones, and the wind made the windows groan. I huddled under my blanket, wide awake. A knock at my door gave me a start. Jack stood there, barefoot, holding a lantern. Lucifer's loose in the kitchen. What do you want me to do about it? He shrugged. You're better at negotiations. Together, we went to tackle the chaos. Sure enough, the goat had his head in the flour bin. Lucifer, I screeched, don't make me fetch the shovel. Jack bit back a laugh. He's not scared of you. No, he respects me. There's a difference. I finally lured him out with half a biscuit and a firm kick in the rump. I slammed the door shut, and Jack rolled the flour barrel over to block him from headbutting it open again. Standing in the dim kitchen, both covered in flour, I looked at Jack and burst out laughing. I laughed until I couldn't breathe. This marriage is ridiculous. He nodded. Yup. Want to see how ridiculous it can get? I huffed, holding the stitch in my side. He tilted his head. You offering a truce or a showdown? A treaty, I corrected. One bedsheet at a time. Jack Coltrane looked at me with such honesty and beamed without hesitation. That smile nearly stopped my heart. The next day, Jack insisted we ride into town together. Said something about buying seed and fencing wire, but I suspected it had more to do with letting the gossips know Cassidy Lane wasn't just a mix-up. She was his wife. We rode in silence, the wagon creaking beneath us, dust trailing behind like a stubborn ghost. When we pulled up outside the general store, heads turned. A sour woman squinted at me like she'd just smelled vinegar, and that awful Mr. Fitch from the store nearly spilled the papal barrel he was rolling. Well, I'll be, he muttered, scratching his head. Jack Coltrane still got his ordered bride. And why not? I added, hopping down. No better man than him around. Jack's face turned red, and he hurried inside. I stuck my head in the air and followed him, smiling at anyone in the way. Inside the store, I scanned the shelves for coffee, soap, and a few more essentials. You sure you want to be seen with me? I asked Jack as we compared beans. He glanced around at the gawkers. Come, Mrs. Coltrane, let's go shopping, he said, marching me out of the store, down the road and into the dressmaker's shop. Pick what you like. He beamed. I asked to see something less potato sack, more respectably married. The dressmaker gasped. Oh, my dear, you're the package bride? A pit of bile rose in my throat. Legal, willing, and with great flair, I said, my hands itching to slap that sickly smile right off her lips. Jack touched my arm lightly, leaning closer. Settle down, love, he whispered in my ear. She scurried away and came back a few minutes later, a pale blue dress with lace trim folded neatly over her arm. Taking it off her, I held it up to myself and turned to Jack. Well? He blinked. You'll make the rest of the town faint. I'll take it. Lunch at the saloon was Jack's idea. It turned out to be a mistake. The minute we walked in, a woman with hair the color of sin and a voice like melted corn syrup draped herself across the bar. Jack, she purred, you finally bringin' someone home to meet us all? I slid onto a stool beside him, smiling sweetly. I'm Cassidy Coltrane, wife. She blinked. Ain't that something? I leaned closer. You might want to close your mouth, sugar. Flies love a wide entrance. Jack nearly choked on his whiskey. Back in the wagon, he didn't say a word until we were halfway home. You didn't have to do that. She was flirting with my husband. He shook his head. Still not used to hearing that. Guess you'd better start. He glanced over, eyes soft but confused. You serious about staying? I stared out across the plains. I'm serious about not running anymore. Jack reached over and touched my hand briefly. Then I reckon we better start fixing up that ranch. I didn't say it aloud, but I felt it. For the first time, it didn't feel like a mistake. I hadn't planned to help with the fencing. I wore my new dress, after all. Pale blue lace that made me feel more like a woman and less like a stubborn burr stuck to Jack Coltrane's boot. But the minute he muttered something about me not being cut out for post-hole work, I rolled up my sleeves and grabbed a shovel. 3 holes later, I was sweating through my corset and cursing whoever invented them. You all right? Jack asked, leaning on a fence post, clearly amused. Just peachy. If peachy means dizzy, sunburnt, and about to throttle you with this lace sleeve. He chuckled. You're a menace in silk. Lace, whatever it is, it's covered in dirt now. I flopped into the grass, skirt puffing out like a defeated souffle. He sat beside me, not too close. You really gonna stay? He asked again. Depends. On what? On whether your goat tries to sleep in the bed again. He laughed. A real one this time, rough and honest. I mean it, I said, picking a blade of grass. I'm not the widow you were expecting. I'm not much of a cook. I hate mornings, and I have opinions. Lots. He looked over. Good, I already know how to cook, and I hate mornings too. We sat there a while, the wind tossing my hair and ruffling his shirt collar. Finally, he said, we could build a better fence. One you'd be proud of. I smirked. You asking me to stay and help build your fences? He met my eyes. I'm asking you to build our fences. There it was again, the flicker in his voice, in his gaze. It felt like he wasn't just tolerating me anymore. I stood, dusted off my skirt. All right, Jack Coltrane, but I get to pick the next fence line. Deal. And I want my own hammer. You'll get the fanciest one in the territory. We grinned at each other, 2 fools in a field of half-dug holes and even less sense. But somehow, it felt like building something that might last. The storm rolled in mid-afternoon. One moment, the sky was a clean prairie blue, and the next, it darkened like spilled ink. I don't like the look of that, Jack muttered, glancing up while tying off a fence wire. Me neither, I said, wiping sweat from my brow. And where's Lucifer? We didn't have to wonder long. A distant ma echoed from the barn. We both bolted. By the time we reached the barn, the wind was howling and dust whipped into our eyes. Lucifer had somehow gotten himself stuck on a hayloft beam, halfway up, all 4 legs dangling like a particularly smug chandelier. You deal with the goat, Jack yelled over the wind. I'll batten down. I always deal with the goat. 10 minutes, 1 ladder, and a mild concussion. Later, Lucifer was freed, Jack had returned, and we hunkered in the barn as rain pelted the tin roof. Jack sat beside me in the hay, soaked to the bone. Lucifer chewed cud like he was above it all. You all right? He asked. My pride's bruised, but otherwise, fine. We were quiet for a while, the kind of silence that settled deep and comfortable, even with the storm raging around us. I was supposed to marry a man once, I said suddenly. Back east. He was rich, well-mannered. Everyone approved. Jack didn't look surprised. What happened? I caught him kissing my sister. His brow twitched. Yikes. Under the gazebo, during my engagement party. Double yikes. I gave a bitter little laugh. I ran. I got on a train and continued. That's how I found the advertisement. The train stopped, and it was on a wall at the station, so I stayed. Said the interview was at 2 p.m. that very day. Didn't even think, really. Jack raised his eyebrow and leaned back against the stall door. Well, I didn't exactly write my ad either. What? My cousin put it in, said I was turning into a cranky old bachelor who'd die alone with a goat for company. We both turned to look at Lucifer. He sneezed. I mean, I said, he's not wrong. Jack chuckled, low and warm. Outside, lightning cracked. He turned to me. You ever think maybe mistakes ain't mistakes? Just badly wrapped gifts? Depends. Some gifts bite. He reached over, brushed a bit of hay from my sleeve. This one's growing on me. I swallowed hard, feeling the shift. Me too. Back at the house, soaked and sore, Jack tossed me a dry towel. You staying for dinner? He asked. I live here, don't I? Guess you do. He started to walk off, then paused. And Cassidy? Yeah? Next time the goat's on the roof, it's your turn. I threw the towel at him. He didn't duck fast enough. For once, it felt like home. The next morning, in one of Jack's 2 big flannel shirts, I wandered into the kitchen. He was already at the stove, poking at something in a skillet. You cook now? I asked. I cook when I don't want to starve, he replied. Eggs, potatoes, biscuits, slightly scorched but upright and proud. He waved his hand for me to sit at the table, so I did, with a lightness in my step. He grinned. Don't get used to it. After breakfast, we patched the fence and a corner of the roof. No one fell. It felt oddly good. At noon, I found a pie recipe. I'm baking, I announced. Jack raised an eyebrow. Is this a peace offering? This is a power move. 1 burned forearm and 3 spice jar mistakes later, I managed to pull it off, mostly. Jack took a bite. I knew I married you for a reason. I froze. I mean, you married me because the postal system failed, I said. You thought I was the other Cassidy. Exactly, he added, but the pie helps. We laughed. Then he looked at me. Cassidy, if you wanted to stay, I wouldn't fight it. I was hoping you'd say that, because I was about to bake a second pie. Jack reached for my hand. This time, I let him hold it. Saturday night brought a rare event, a town dance in the church barn, lanterns, chairs, lemonade, and horse sweat. Jack had brushed his hair and changed shirts. Progress. You sure about this? He asked. Nope, I said brightly, but I curled my hair, so I expect at least one dramatic entrance. He sighed. The barn buzzed. The fiddler was off-key but determined. People glanced up. That's the mail order one, someone whispered. Jack stiffened. Lean into it, I whispered. What? Walk like you just won a prize goat. His arm slid around my waist. First time in public. My ribs ached in the best way. We danced. Badly. Jack stepped on my toes, spun me into a chair. We laughed anyway. Midway through a waltz, he murmured, Your trouble. I laughed. Flatterer. And beautiful. Now you're lying, I said softly. Jack shook his head. You walked into my life like a windstorm, Cassidy Lane, and I'd rather have that than silence. It wasn't poetic, but it was real, and it undid me. Outside, under the stars, he cupped my cheek. "Still married by mistake," I said. Maybe the mistake was the best thing that ever happened to me. He kissed me. The world went still. The morning after the dance, the kitchen smelled of coffee and cinnamon. Jack was at the stove, humming last night's tune. "You're gonna murder that skillet," I said. He turned, sheepish. "I was trying to make breakfast." "You trying to propose again? Because your last one was real romantic," I said. Jack grinned and wiped his hands on a towel. I was. I felt my eyes widen as he pulled a wooden ring box out of his pocket. Not fancy. Inside was a silver ring with a turquoise stone fixed to a crooked band. I bartered with the silversmith, 4 chickens and some moonshine. That explains the wobble. "Cassidy Lane, I know we didn't start right, but I want to build something real, messy, ours. Is this a trick to get me to cook more?" "Only a little." He slipped the ring on my finger. Too big. Perfect. I guess this means I'm staying. Jack cupped my face in both his hands. "You were always staying. You just hadn't realized it yet." We kissed. Lucifer bleated from the door. "If that goat eats my pie dough again..." Jack laughed. "Let's get married properly this time. Maybe leave the goat off the guest list." "Deal." Some mistakes feel like endings, but sometimes they're just beginnings in disguise. In a town full of whispers, Cassidy Lane and Jack built something louder, love. Not perfect, not planned, but beautifully real. We hope you enjoyed Married by Mistake, another heartfelt love story from Timeless Tales by Anna. If it made you smile, maybe even tear up a little, like and subscribe so you never miss the next one. And until then, keep believing in second chances, even the ones that arrive with goats.